to the Power of One. Today, we are going to be speaking with Liz, who is dynamic. And Liz has a very, very important role with first responders and with military personnel. So, we're going to speak with her today, and she's going to tell you everything that she is doing. But the silver lining is she can help if you're in need. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, Liz, tell the viewers about you and what you do, the agency you started.
Yeah. So I'm a Chicago police officer myself, so I'm a first responder. I'm still active. I've been on the job for 21 years, and I am a mental health professional. I have a master's in forensic psychology. So while earlier in my career, while I was doing all of that work, I was back in grad school, did all my clinicals and all of that. Fast forward, I was very much interested in trauma. That's really my specialty, and suicides. I didn't realize early on in my career how much suicide affects first responders in the military until I got on the job and I was a young girl. I really paid attention a lot to the chatter that was happening around me whenever we would have a suicide, not just in my agency, but others across the country. And it was just really devastating to see that this was a phenomenon that just continued to happen over and over again. And by listening to the chatter and hearing how people responded to it, obviously everybody was devastated, but really just trying to answer so many unanswered questions that I felt would always, happen in conversation. People trying to figure out how this happens, why it happens, was something that really intrigued me and got my attention. I eventually went on to get certified as a suicide psychological autopsy investigator. And so what I do is I take a case of suicide, and from the day that the individual was deceased, I work my way back by interviewing different friends, family, coworkers, anyone that was the closest to the individual. And we're really trying to understand how this manifested itself and what were all the contributing factors that were present in the individual's life to really understand how this occurred. For me, I really started getting into this work, and what got my attention was really just trying to get to this root of the problem because everyone sees this happening over and over again, but we really weren't understanding how this manifests itself. Like, why does it happen with certain individuals but not others? And really just trying to figure out once we understand and get to the root of the problem, is there anything that we could potentially do to start reducing these or turn around the numbers and maybe intervene at some point when people are in crisis and before they get to the point where they're in suicidal ideation? So I then started my nonprofit, Resilient Heroes, and that's what we're doing today, is really doing a lot of work with trauma and suicide, specifically offering psychoeducation of trauma and suicide of first responders across the country and the military. And the first responders include police, firefighters, paramedics, and our dispatchers. And so that's really what we're focused on with Resilient Heroes and trying to provide a more proactive approach instead of just being reactive to these suicides that just continue to happen.
Do you find that it is from seeing horrific crime scenes, or is it like things stacked on top of different things? So it's the crime scenes, and then it's your family. And then, so for me, dealing with victims and survivors of homicide every day, all day, I'm always thinking something's going to go wrong, or I'm always thinking something is wrong. So do you think it's stacked on top of each other, or it's just seeing those horrible crime scenes day in and day out?
That's an excellent question. And it's important because a lot of individuals think that it's one particular thing, right? It's one particular reason, like a cause of death when it comes to suicide. And it's actually not. It is a multitude of things. It's various factors, and every case is so different. It varies case to case. You may have a little more of this contributing to this particular case versus this other case. It all varies. But absolutely, a lot of the stress and the trauma that comes from the jobs that we do is very much a big piece. And it's interesting because it's not that we can't do our jobs. We do it and we do it well, and we take on a lot of trauma. I mean, years and years of trauma that we experience. The problem becomes that we don't process those traumas. And when you don't process them and you try to just kind of, shove it down, because that's pretty much what we're good at,
Mhm,
or
mhm.
denial, and it starts to catch up with you one way or another. And then you add on the other factors of the job, the demands from the job, your personal life, interpersonal relationship issues, mental health, physical health, sleep deprivation. I mean, there's just a variety of different factors and pieces that contribute to an individual getting to the point where they fall into crisis mode and then eventually spiral into a deeper, darker hole, falling into suicidal ideation.
Do you find that first responders take advantage of the services that are available to them at the job as far as therapy? So I will say within the African American community, we don't always look at therapy as being a good thing. It's just in the African American community. So do you find that the first responders take advantage of those resources that are available, or again, they just hold that in? And then two, we males are different from females.
Mhm.
Society has it so like a man can't cry, or a man can't be vulnerable, or a man can't express his feelings because it makes him look less of a man, which we know none of that is true. So do
Right.
you find that many of the first responders, males, are not taking advantage of some of the services that are available to them to help them unpack those real hard days?
I think there was definitely a time when many first responders on this job, especially in the past, absolutely taboo, not acceptable, right? Because within our own culture as first responders, right? There's a culture within this profession, right? Where you're supposed to be tough. You're
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to cry about it. You're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to complain. You deal with it. This is a part of your job, almost like dehumanizing us, right? As if we're not supposed to feel anything. You're not supposed to have reactions or anything like that. I think nowadays across the country, in all kinds of jobs, they're pushing, mental health and wellness,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that,
Mm-hmm.
the secret's out, we're actually human beings, right?
Right.
So these things happen. I think people are doing better with it. I think the younger generation of first responders coming on now, I think because this is being presented in a way that's different as opposed to like older generations where they're saying, listen, it's okay not to be okay, and, get help, talk to somebody. I think they're less reluctant. I think they're kind of trying to get ahead of it more than I've ever seen in the past. But I do think in the past it was something that was much more taboo. It still is very difficult. I don't think everyone takes advantage of it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's fears of, what people are going to say about you if they do find out, what the job will do if they find out, not
Mm-hmm.
understanding what you can and can't do, as far as psychotherapy for the most part across the country is something that's okay to go do, whether it's within your agency through the employee assistance programs or going
Mm-hmm.
outside to the private sector. But people still just aren't trusting. It's very difficult. There's a lot of fear associated with getting help. Fear of showing a sign of weakness, fear of it not working. So
Mm-hmm.
there's still a lot of hesitation. We still have a lot of work to do, but I do think that we are starting to see more support around it. So then people start to feel that, okay, maybe it's something I should do, or I may want to do. And one of the things that we really provide in a lot of this training when I go out and train these officers is understanding not just what's available to them, because sometimes people just don't even know what resources are available.
Mm-hmm.
All people really know, and especially like in this population, is psychotherapy as the only therapeutic modality available to them. They don't know what EMDR is. They don't know what other types of, options are available. They don't know where to even begin to look for them. A lot of people know that maybe your agency may offer it through their employee assistance program, but it's not really trusted by everybody because there's that link to the department, to the agency. And so we really want to push for people to learn to self-advocate for themselves, understand what's available. What do I do when I find myself experiencing these particular um, behaviors that I'm experiencing or emotions and whatnot, and what that looks like, where you turn to, how you go about talking to these individuals, and finding what the best fit is for you. Because one of the things about psychology and when it comes to mental health is finding the right fit is half the battle. And people don't
Mhm.
realize that. And sometimes people are, they seek someone out. It's not the greatest fit, but they just keep it going. And then it doesn't work. It's a disservice to both, and it's kind of like you're wasting your time. Move on if you don't feel that this is the right fit. I don't know, even if the sound of the voice of the individual is just not to your liking, it reminds you of someone, just don't waste your time. It's okay. So really getting a lot of the information to these individuals, the self-care tools are necessary, and we need to do it before people are in crisis, just like anything
Mhm.
else. When
Right.
they train us for any kind of training and any kind of work that as a first responder, the tactics, right? Defense tactics, firearms tactics, all the other tactics for paramedics, medical, everything. They sit us through hours and hours of training how to handle these and in my case as an officer, how to handle your weapon, how to disassemble it, when you're supposed to shoot or not, target practice, all of it. Why aren't we spending that much amount of time in providing individuals when they first come on the job, during their job, right before retirement to understand how to handle all these different phases and handle this work?
Mhm.
Because when you're experiencing trauma and you're experiencing a lot of the difficulties that we experience, we have to understand the possibilities of what we might be faced with. Understanding that some of the things that you're going to see may be horrendous out there, are difficult to really stomach, right? You don't always see the nicest side of
Mhm.
society. And so, what do I do now if I've been traumatized with something and I can't sleep? I can't eat. I try to
Mhm.
go to bed and I have these recurring intrusive thoughts that keep coming up, and as much as I try to distract myself or do something to put them away, they keep coming up, and now they start taking a little bit of control of my life in a way. It starts to haunt me, and I become irritable, less sleep, having issues with others around me, my coworkers, my family, the public, because I'm just struggling in my own head. So these are the things that we need to start talking about and really putting out there for people to understand that, hey, there's going to be very abnormal situations that you might face, and your reactions are actually very normal. It's quite
Mhm.
the opposite the way that we walk around. We keep thinking that we're abnormal, something's wrong with us because we're struggling with a lot of the stuff that we deal with. And it's like, no, you're having very normal reactions to very abnormal situations. And a lot of people don't know that and they struggle with it.
So, two things. You're speaking about law enforcement and military. So, law enforcement, we know that they see gruesome things on a daily basis. What about military? Why is the suicide rate so high among the branches of military? And when there is an officer, EMT, who commits suicide, and you said this is you guys will go everywhere. When that happens and they commit suicide, or someone of the branch of the military commits suicide, how do you find out about it? Do you reach out to the family? How do you get that information? And do you find they're receptive? So I know I asked two big questions. So the
Sure.
first one is first responders. I know the law enforcement and EMT, they're seeing gruesome things every day, all day. So we know that. With military, what contributes to the suicidal factor for them? And then once you find out between law enforcement or the military that someone committed suicide, how do you get that information? How do you contact the family? And are they welcoming?
Okay. So, with first responders, the police, in municipalities, every municipality is different, right? You have more challenges in like a lot of the bigger agencies like Chicago, LA, New York, right? Because they're large agencies and there's a lot going on. They cover a lot. But nowadays, I mean, even in the small towns, I mean, there's just here's the thing, crime has evolved so much. It's gotten so much more violent, so much more gruesome. I mean, we have school shootings for God's sake, and small towns even, so all kinds of mass shootings, even, wherever they target. So it can happen everywhere and anywhere, first and foremost. The military, whether you don't have to necessarily always just be in combat. There's a lot of very similarities between the first responders in the military in the sense that these are organizations that are structured very similar in the sense that, there's hierarchy and, there's jobs, there's operations that need to be completed. And so a lot of within the agency, within that military branch, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of, your coworkers, a lot of, the politics of it all, because it really exists in the two. It can be very draining. It's stressful. In the military, you may not be around your family. You may not be home. It's just there's so much that's unsettling. And so it becomes, again, very difficult for some individuals being away from home, everything that goes on in your role. There's a lot of responsibility as well, whether you're in combat or not. It can be very stressful, that job. And again, in law enforcement, some of these individuals may not always be seeing the most gruesome things every single day, but nonetheless, it's still very challenging. Again, it varies case by case. And I end up finding out, depending on where the individual's working, their role, what they had going on. Remember, it's not just the job.
Mhm.
It's the combination of these jobs with our lives, our personal lives. That's where there's a lot of like the clashes, and it becomes difficult because these jobs are so high and they're very demanding,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You know, um, compared to in some cases sometimes a corporate America job where it's like Monday through Friday set schedule, you're off the weekends, usually 9 to 5. I mean, in some cases people work longer hours and they work weekends, but typically, right, it's a little different. When it comes to military and the first responders, there is no routine really. We don't get those holidays off. It's just there's a lot of sacrificing, and so it becomes very difficult, especially when the job and your personal life, they clash. And as far as the autopsies and when I find word of the suicides, so most of the time I find out about the suicides and I actually reach out to family members, or I have one point of contact usually that I make with a deceased person's closest family or friend or coworker. I have that one point of contact that I reach out to. I explain the process and what this is about and why we're doing it. Essentially, we want to learn as much more as we can so that we can learn from these cases and find out what we can start doing differently and being more proactive. That's the whole point. Most people are very receptive for a couple reasons. One, it's so tragic and devastating what they've experienced that they would like to help in any way they can so that this doesn't happen to another family member with their loved one. Two, I believe there's so many unanswered questions that people are left with. And although we can't change the outcome, I think a lot of individuals are trying to find some way to understand, make sense of what has occurred here. And it does give them some closure because you do get answers to a lot of questions. So people, I very much explain the whole process very thoroughly, the methodology of it all. I make sure that they understand like the confidentiality and how important that is. Not to get this out to just anyone and everyone. It's really interviewing at least 5 individuals. It's usually more. And then I don't necessarily share what I spoke with to this person.
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
tell this person what they said. It's very much all compiled information that I keep separate from all the individuals. Then I bring all the data and I go through it, forensically. It's my job from that forensic psychology standpoint to really just get all the information, get it up, put it all together, and then I end up creating about a 15 to 20 page report, which I then sit down with each individual and I share the report with them and I break, one on one and I break it down and explain it thoroughly. And then I end up giving the one copy to that one point of contact, and I let that point of contact be the distributing individual. And it's usually the individual that has like a very strong major role, like a parent, a significant other, not just anyone who's kind of like,
Mhm.
yeah, I kind of knew the person. No, it's somebody that's a very strong, has a very strong role there. To keep that confidentiality intact is so important. That's why I leave it to that individual to then, if you want to share, make copies and share it, then so be it. But it's not my place to really just kind of pass this out. We want to try to, preserve some sense of confidentiality in memory of that individual. So yeah.
Now, what states are you in, and how can someone contact you, and is there a cost?
So, yes, I am in Illinois, in Chicago, but I provide the service across the country. I travel across the entire US providing the psychoeducation. And anyone can get a hold of me via, the website. My info's all there, my phone number, email. And for the suicide psychological autopsies, I'm still trying to compile so much more data. So I am doing this pro bono for the first responders and the military and really trying to get more and more information and data and help out these families for sure.
That's awesome. Can you please give them your website and your phone number?
Yes. So it's Resilient Heroes is the nonprofit, and it's www.resilient-heroes.com. My cell is 773-842-9784, and you can also email me at liz@resilientheroes.com.
Now, you also do a training, correct? Is that in with the Resilient Heroes?
It is, yes. So Resilient Heroes, I started this nonprofit because I found that most agencies across the country run into this hurdle, unfortunately, where they cannot provide training when it comes to budget and finances. There's only so much that they can provide, and they really focus on getting their members to have the mandated annual stuff. Once you get that mandated stuff completed, then it's kind of like, all right, we have no more funding for any more stuff that we would maybe like to do. And so when it comes to this, which is so important, the self-care and getting these members all of the information that they need in order to be able to understand what happens if you fall into this type of situation or others, like really getting this self-care is so important. So I started Not Resilient Heroes to make sure that agencies don't have to worry about that. We want to make sure that we are offering our members everything that they need, that tool set essentially to be able to survive the work that they do, to be able to, get through their personal lives, retire, and still go on to live their best lives. So Resilient Heroes, it's my job as a nonprofit to try to bring in, individual donations, look out for grants, do fundraisers so that we cover the costs when we go to the agencies. Essentially, I reach out to an agency or they reach out to me. The idea is to have that agency host a location within, that they have, maybe a conference room of their agency or something. And then we set it up to the organizational needs, the operational needs actually of the agency. Do they want it to be a half a day? Do they want it to be a full day where if it's a bigger group, like 50 or more, we tend to do, a full day where it's a 4 on lunch and then a 4 on. That way we have everybody able to participate and, really get through it, not rushed. It's a very the thought of how the design of it was made was very, very thought out because I do sit in that seat still as a trainee, and I sometimes I feel that we have the best individuals maybe coming to provide uh knowledge on a certain topic, but the
Mhm,
delivery kind of just they miss the mark. And so for me, it
mhm,
was very important to understand, we are a bit of a very stubborn and difficult breed. I'm not gonna lie. And I mean, think about it. We're the type where, we're the helpers. Everyone turns to us to always
mhm,
get
mhm.
the answers, right? And we think we know it all sometimes, and the stuff may not apply. It's very difficult when when you haven't really walked this walk. And so to be able to not just have another random training or seminar, it was important to be able to not only give them the knowledge, but also be able to speak to these individuals from experience, right? And be able to apply that experience when we do have the conversation, when we're talking about all of this stuff. It's very interactive, it's scenario based as well, and it's bringing up a lot of practical knowledge from the field, from the streets, in conjunction to that psychological knowledge that's necessary for them to to actually have resonate and walk away with, to be able to apply for themselves and really be able to have like an effect on their perspective.
Real quick, Liz, what happens, or do you do anything for the retired first responders and the people who are no longer in the military? Real quick, answer that question.
Yes, I do work with the retirees and the veterans. There's a bunch of veteran groups here in Illinois that I've been working with. And it's so important because I feel that they're often forgotten.
Mhm.
Once we're sometimes not the nicest when it comes to our retirees and our veterans. We tend to be forgetful. And I get it, life happens, right? We're very close knit for the most part when we're on this type of in this work and doing these jobs. And when people retire, we say we're always going to be family and we're close, but then it's like 6, 8, 10 months later, it's like, has anyone heard from John? Has anybody talked to John? No, I haven't. I haven't. No one.
Mhm.
And not everyone doesn't have a very strong support system at home. Some people don't have family, and so they're often forgotten. And so it's important to really, especially with the first responders in the military, pre-retirement, at that point when they're going to retire, and even after they've retired, it's important to really present this information because when it comes to these types of jobs, it's not just a job, it's an identity, right? It's a lifestyle. So when you're leaving this, it's a huge transition for a lot of people, and they really struggle with that and they don't do well with it. And oftentimes people, it's like, oh, I want to retire. I want to get out of that. I want to be done with this. And then they retire and they realize, oh, wait, no one filled me in. No one gave me the memo. This is pretty difficult because it's a part of your identity, that you no longer have, right? You go into this civilian life, if you will, and it is very different than when you're on the job, because even when we're doing this job and say we're off duty, right? You're not doing your military base, you're not at your station, whatever, you're not working, you're still in that identity.
Mhm.
If something happens, you either get involved to help or you call it in or something, and that you still are that police officer. And so now when you retire, you no longer have those duties. You don't always have the ability to do as much as you could. You don't have that ability. So that becomes difficult for people, and it's very hard. If you've been doing this for 30, 20, 40 years, and all of a sudden you no longer are carrying an ID that says you're an officer, or you don't have your weapon, or you know what I mean? It becomes
Mhm.
very challenging.
For them. Yeah. Liz, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you so much for having the passion and dedication to help our first responders in the military. Thank you so much.
So much. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for joining me today, all first responders and military personnel. We care about you, we love you, and there is free resources available to you. You do not have to go through this alone. Peace and love.